On SABC News Channel 404, and of course it's time for On the Record. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa has promised a detailed response to South Africa following our plunge into a technical recession. Now, the economy contracted by 0.7% in the second quarter after a 2.2% contraction in the first quarter. The South African public has had to contend with an increase in the rate of VAT, that's value-added tax, from 14 to 15%, and this was the first VAT increase in 25 years. And earlier this month, the government intervened by disbursing 500 million rand to contain the petrol price increase at 5 cents. But today, Energy Minister Radebe warned that fuel prices could rise higher next month due to the rand's weakness in recent weeks. So the current economic situation has been characterized as the worst in post-apartheid South Africa. So what will it take to turn this situation around? And we're going to discuss that and grapple with that. And of course, this recession and the impact thereof. And we are joined in studio right now by Mr. Louw, who is the Executive Director of the Free Market Foundation, and will be joined shortly by Duma Gqubule as well. But before we get into the interview, let's take a listen to what President Ramaphosa and also Deputy President David Mabuza had to say after the announcement of the recession.
I'm saying we should not be fearful and think that we are in a recession. We are not. This is going to be corrected, I have no doubt about it. And besides that, we've been here before. We should not forget that we have been here before. We have faced such a situation before, and economies go through cyclical processes. Economies grow and they go down sometimes, but in the end, smart governments are governments that respond and give guidance to what needs to happen, which is precisely what our government is going to do. We are going to respond to this moment that we are going through, and in a number of days we are going to be giving a government response on what do we want to do to inject more impetus in our economy.
As a country, we have noticed the current decline. I don't probably agree that to those who are saying we're in a technical recession. I don't. Because we have not taken a very comprehensive picture. We're taking a quarter by quarter statistics. We have not taken the overall statistics over a period. Well, but I'm confident that as government we're going to reverse this tide.
And that was before him, President Cyril Ramaphosa, and ending that was, of course, the Deputy President David Mabuza with their views on the recession, or perhaps the lack thereof, Louw. So is government downplaying this recession?
Well, whether you downplay it or not, the fact is the economy is stagnating. The GDP per person in South Africa, the average income of South Africans in international currency terms, is almost the same as it was in 1981. We are stagnating. Just to give you a simple example, if we'd grown at the 7% that the government said it wanted to grow when it came to power in 1994, then we would now have a per capita income in South Africa of about $25,000, $25,000 to $30,000. We in fact have a national income of about $6,000. In other words, we are now one of the stagnating and poorer countries of the world. We would have been one of the world's wealthiest countries. So what we have to do is grow at 4, 5, 6, 7%. And unfortunately, all the rhetoric, pre and post the new president, not one single policy announcement has been made that is pro-growth and pro-investment. Not one. On the contrary, a long litany of policies have been announced that have the opposite effect. For example, the national minimum wage. is going to put small business out of business and increase unemployment, and the government knows that. The policies like the IRP, the resource plan, which is the energy policy. South Africa has more uranium and more coal than virtually any other country on earth. And what do? We announce an energy policy where we're going to stop using what we have and start importing very expensive, loss-making, so-called renewable energy technology. And it goes on and on. We announced that state-owned enterprises that are making losses, corrupt, inefficient, are going to be perpetuated, endlessly bailed out, old apartheid dinosaurs in the new South Africa. You look at, for example, the mining bill, which is a way of guaranteeing that no one will invest in mining. And so it goes. Everything. Exchange controls are perpetuated. You know that investors who invested in South Africa in February would now have lost, just on exchange control, 35% or a third of their investment. The rand bounces around uncertainty, but this is important. For the president to go around the world running investment summits, announcing an investment summit on the same day that he announces expropriation without compensation. This is like a mother with a baby sitting on her knee, with one hand feeding the baby with a bottle, saying we want the baby to be healthy and to grow, and with the other hand throttling the baby around the neck and saying we want to not allow this baby to grow. So not one single policy has been announced that is pro-investment and pro-growth.
So what's wrong with the policies we currently have?
Well, they are all anti-investment. For example, if you say to somebody, please come and invest in my country, but I'm going to subject you to exchange control, which no sophisticated economy in the world does. They'll say, sorry, we're going to a country that likes us and trusts us. And if you say to them, come and invest here, we're going to expropriate your property without compensation. Property doesn't mean land. You must understand, it means everything. Pension funds, shares, equities, intellectual property, patent rights are all subject to expropriation without compensation. You ask foreigners to come and invest here at the same time as you tell them we are going to do things that investors don't like. Well, this is just simply silly. It's like a sick joke.
But on the expropriation front, I mean, is that not just scaremongering? We had Theresa May here. She heard, what the South African government was planning. She didn't seem too fazed by it. We had Moody's here today earlier. And, they all seem to think that provided that this is done, in accordance with the rules and regulations that governs this country, there's no problem there.
Look, I don't want to get hooked on this. I don't think it's actually very important for the people who are most scared at the moment, namely white Afrikaner farmers. In fact, I have a wager on the internet. Anyone can bet against me. I've bet that not one single white Afrikaans farmer is going to be expropriated by the next election. Who will be expropriated and are expropriated in large numbers are low-income, poor black South Africans. So when they want to build a community centre in Alex, what do? They simply give an eviction order to 25 households and say go, and they pay them nothing. Black South Africans, poor South Africans are being treated right now the way they were under Verwoerd. Verwoerd's ghost walks around in Luthuli House with a big smile on his face, saying if I knew the ANC would implement my anti-black policies, I would have given them power long ago.
Which anti-black policies?
Well, for example, the fact that black people don't have property rights. The government should long ago, in 1994, have said every black-held property in South Africa, there's somewhere between 5 and 10 million, is getting a freehold title deed. And we would now have had more black landowners than white landowners.
Aren't they not busy with that?
Oh, they're busy with it at a very slow rate, and when they so-called give people title deeds, it's RDP houses subject to a so-called preemptive clause, which is a kind of house arrest, which says, we're giving you a house, but you have to stay in the house we put you in, which is exactly what happened under apartheid. And if you're not there when we come there, we're repossessing the house. And 80 or 90% of the people with these preemptive clauses sell their houses, and then when eventually the thing expires, nobody actually even knows where the original owner was. So black South Africans...
Isn't it a bit more complex than that, Leon? Isn't it a matter of saying to people, you saying that you are poor, you cannot afford to buy or build a house of your own. Government steps in and says, you know, we will come in here, we will provide the house, and you need to stay in that house. Because what purpose does it serve? And especially looking at, you know, the housing backlog in this country, when people can actually just get up, receive a house, sell it, and move on and try to claim another house.
You know what we should celebrate? The fact that there's a buyer. That there are black people who want to buy these houses, can afford them, willing to pay the rates, willing to improve them. And the person who sells, it's time we regarded these people as mature human beings and adults who can decide for themselves how best to live their lives. And to this patronizing, and I'm sorry to say, racist attitude. White people are never treated like this. This is even now, a generation after apartheid, we still treat black people as if they are children of the state. It's actually astounding. I mean, I can't understand why there aren't riots. And so what you want to do is you want to say, we are ending this nonsense. Black people are entitled to trade on the streets. The shanty towns are, I'll give you a simple example. I work right now with a big shanty town in South Africa called Marathon and Delport in Gqubule, and these people want to improve their own houses. They want to replace their tin shacks on private property, belongs to the Redefine company, with brick and mortar buildings. They will do it themselves at their own cost. They're not asking for RDP houses or charity, but the law won't let them. So black South Africans are being held down by old apartheid township laws, zoning laws, property laws. It's actually despicable. And the country is poor, and it'll stay poor until they say, we are drawing a line in the sand, no more apartheid, and from now on, high growth policies, ones proven all over the world to work, which is deregulate, liberalize, get rid of red tape, lower the tax rates, scrap exchange control, and invite investors into where property rights are guaranteed and secure. That is how you grow.
Well, you know, you touched on the national minimum wage earlier on, and in the context of this recession and job losses that we are seeing. And some people would argue that we are seeing those job losses because of the policies that you pointed to earlier as well, and also because of the national minimum wage in particular. But you spoke about, you know, how government treats people with regard to the housing scenario and treating them like children. Well, when companies refuse to pay a minimum wage of 3,500 Rand to adults in this country, isn't that treating them like children?
Well, let's firstly say what big companies pay and what big unions negotiate. That's absolutely fine. I'm 100% for it. It's actually not what we call companies. It's small, informal businesses, people who are plumbers and electricians and carpenters and motor mechanics and peasant farmers and people running trading stores in little country villages in the Tugela Basin near Nkandla and so on. These are the people who cannot pay these wages. And what you do is you say to an unemployed person, and let's understand this, 65% of young black women are unemployed. They have never had a job and they've got no prospect of getting a job. Now, when you say to these people, unless you can find somebody who will pay you more than the current low end of the wages, you have to stay unemployed. This is again an insult to people. Let people decide for themselves what job they want to take, and it's better to have the human dignity of a real job with real income than no job. And there is no choice between a minimum wage and a high wage. The choice is between a minimum wage and no wage.
What about the working poor? Because are we not perpetuating that? We look at the price of fuel, of transport, you know, of food for people right now. And we always tend to talk about the petrol price, which betrays our middle class bias when we discuss these issues. The price of illuminating paraffin is set to go up by over 1 Rand. And we know that it is the poorest of the poor who use illuminating paraffin.
Precisely.
But we don't talk about that.
Precisely. You're absolutely right. So why is the government regulating the price of, why doesn't it just unleash competition, allow people to compete freely? We regulate the energy price, the petrol price. No advanced country does that.
But to complete my point is that if you are paying someone 3,500 rand, given the spatial inequality that exists in this country, and we know how far people have to travel to and from work. If they go through, you know, what they have to pay on transport, what they have to pay for food, to take care of their basic necessities, how far can 3,500 rand really take them?
Why do you want to pay 3,500? That's mean. I want to pay everybody. Of course it's mean, but people will pay the 3,500 because that is the amount that is stipulated. No, they won't. Why not say 100,000? Why don't we say let everyone earn 100,000? And the reason is everybody knows that you will increase unemployment. So what we do is we play a very dishonest, fraudulent game. We say make the minimum wage so low that the increased unemployment is not dramatic. But we're still causing unemployment, we know that. So if you really want people to earn more, then say let's pay them 50,000, 100,000, $1 million. I mean, everyone can be a millionaire, pay them $1 million a month. You know, President Ramaphosa knows, everybody knows that what you're doing is fraudulently cheating and lying to people. You're saying the minimum wage won't cause unemployment because it's so low. And then we say we're not paying enough. Well, make up your mind. Minimum wage causes unemployment for the country's most desperate, destitute people, most of whom are young black women.
I don't think that contradiction is lost on many South Africans about the minimum wage, but many people are very clear that that is an absolute pittance. And imagine if you had to live on 3,500 rand a month, how would that go for you? We're going to take a break, and when we come back, Duma Gqubule will join us for this discussion.
SABC is independent and impartial, and it's important that as we deliver the news, we do so without fear, without favour, without prejudice, and that we ensure that we get the multiplicity of views so that our stories and coverage is balanced.
We pride ourselves on being impartial as well as independent. On the agenda, we basically break down the stories of the day, give it more substance and give it more detail. So all in all, we basically take the news agenda of the day forward.
But more than that, we'll be able to reflect the stories of ordinary folk, people who are trying to make ends meet, facing the most incredibly difficult obstacles and circumstances, and that they will find that their realities are expressed on the SABC.
To be a part of something like this makes me proud, and I think that to be able to report the news in a fair, just, independent and impartial way is what the public broadcaster stands for.
And welcome back to On the Record here on The Full View. And we're talking about the economy, the recession tonight. And we joined now by Duma Gqubule, who's the founding director at the Center for Economic Development and Transformation. And of course, Louw, the executive director of the Free Market Foundation, has been with me. Duma, welcome.
Welcome.
Now, speaking of the recession, you actually predicted this recession.
Yes, you know, in 2016, I was a speaker at the Black Business Council annual conference, and that's the first time I remember publicly talking about what is coming in the South African economy. So I was really surprised when the Minister of Finance says they didn't see this coming. In 2016, I could already see that the economy is slowing down. So what you've seen in South Africa is that between 2014 and now, there's been a big slowdown in the economy, and our GDP per capita by the end of this year will be lower than it was at the end of 2013. So I think it really shows lack of empathy for the president and the deputy president to say that the country is not in a recession, because that's pretty not true. So if they want to pick and choose the statistics they use, I can also pick and choose my statistics. So what you can say is that what is happening now is that if you look at the last quarter, 5 out of 10 sectors were declining, so it was a broad-based thing. And the second thing I want to say, if the trend growth rate is sitting at about 1%, what that means is that anything can come and cause a recession. It can be agriculture one quarter, it can be retail sales the other quarter. So because the growth rate is so low, anything can happen. So the margin for error is very low. So I just think that, so I've seen it coming, and I've been on a one-man campaign for the last 2 years talking for a fiscal and a monetary stimulus to get this economy going. Yeah.
So the president says we shouldn't be too worried about this, and also we reminded that the president also spoke about a target of a 3% growth rate, and of course there was that foreign direct investment of $100 billion that we were going after over a 5-year period.
I've looked at all the forecasts, and all of them now are sitting below 1%, and I think they'll be revised further down. So basically, we're heading for the 3rd consecutive year of declining GDP per capita. So South Africans over the last 14, 15, is it 4 years, 5 years? They're getting poorer on average. So that is what's happening in our economy. It's the worst post-apartheid economic crisis. And what I can't understand is why the government never saw it coming. Many of us did see it coming. And what I would also want to say is that, you know, Sakina, we now need to get out of this hole that we're in. And what I find strange about the government is that the strategy when, from December at the ANC conference was that we want to tick all the boxes that the rating agencies have said we must do. We are going to put a new board at Eskom, try and manage the state-owned enterprises. We're going to do what they want, the rating agents, and we came with austerity budget. And then they're surprised that that doesn't result in growth. Obviously, we could have predicted it doesn't result in growth. Something more substantial has to happen to lift our economy out of this worst post-apartheid economic crisis. And I say that what we need is an ambitious fiscal and monetary stimulus to get our economy going. Yeah.
We've heard about stimuli and the stimulus package of which details we still are none the wiser.
Yes, what the ANC has proposed initially is not a stimulus. We have to make it clear. A stimulus is new money coming into the economy. What the ANC has proposed is reprioritizing existing money. So the latest statement, I'm not sure. We have to see a proper stimulus of sufficient size to make a difference to this economy.
So let's talk about rand strength and how that is impacting on the economy at the moment. Latest news this morning, Energy Minister Jeff Radebe spoke about another fuel price increase, the umpteenth one this year alone, which will push us, according to the Automobile Association, over the 17 rand per litre mark. So you had a very strong view on rand strength, and then I'll give Leon a chance.
Okay, so what I say is that, I don't really want to go into a detail on the rand issue, but I just said that when the currency was appreciating after the ANC conference, I said it's bad for the economy. And then what happened in the second quarter is that the currency started depreciating. And what you saw is that the domestic economy went down, tanked by 3.6%. And if it wasn't for the weaker currency, we would have been, which saved the day in the second quarter, it would have been much worse, yeah. That's what I was saying. So I think South Africans must understand that it cuts two ways with the currency, and I believe that the benefits of a weaker currency far offset the negative part of it, which you've just said, which is the petrol prices.
Do you agree, Leon?
Well, yes and no. I think we have to understand something very simple. All you need to do to grow is not rocket science. You just have to look around the world and say which countries grow and what are their policies, and then we replicate them, and which countries contract and stagnate, and we look at them and we say, let's avoid what they do. And there's a very simple thing. There are about 8 indices in the world that measure policies in countries. There's the Economic Freedom of the World Index, there's the Competitiveness Index, the Doing Business Index, the Freedom House Index, the Corruption Perceptions Index, and so on. About 8. All of them have the same cluster of countries at the top, which grow and are rich, and all of them have the same cluster towards the bottom, and we're about in the middle. Now, what's important about this is we are doing more and more of what the countries at the bottom do. We are moving down every index.
Is it as simple as that?
It is as simple as that. And if you do that, you will contract. It doesn't matter what else you do. There is only one way to grow, that is to liberalize the economy. So what we do is we keep these ridiculous state-owned apartheid enterprises going. We pour money down this insane hole of, for example, subsidizing South African Airways, which is taking money from the poor, from jobs and houses and welfare services and healthcare, and putting it into the pockets of the rich whose bums are on the seats of SA Airways planes. This is a direct subsidy of the rich by the poor, and it was started under apartheid for very obvious reasons, and it carries on today as if nothing has changed. It is disgraceful.
So, unfortunately, we are fast running out of time. This recession obviously needs a response. How do we respond to it?
Yeah, so I've said we need to start thinking imaginatively, and I would actually call a meeting with the economic cluster. I think we need to suspend the inflation target, and I think we should some kind of instruction to the central bank to pursue growth until we have an acceptable growth rate. That's number one. The number two, we have to put together all the stakeholders, public, private. I was presenting at NEDLAC recently, and we should come up with this fiscal stimulus of sufficient size. I would say we need about 500 billion over 3 years to start the economy growing again. And I do think that if South Africans start thinking innovatively about this, we can raise the money and put it into an infrastructure fund that will be start projects. And so what you would have if you have this infrastructure fund, City of Joburg has got huge infrastructure backlogs. They would bid for projects, and there would be a public-private agency to award the projects here.
Leon, what do we need to do?
Yes, I think that that's not going to produce growth. You can't reshuffle the little money we have and just make it worth even less. You've got to get people to invest and build factories and make bicycles and build buildings and make furniture and produce clothing. You've got to produce stuff. You've got to produce wealth. And how do you do that? You make it attractive and safe and stable and certain for investors.
How are we going to convince the rest of the world when we can't convince our own South African companies
that is exactly
to invest
right.
in this
Exactly.
country?
Our PIC, the biggest investor in South Africa, the Public Investment Corporation, announced today that it is going to invest abroad. In other words, what money we have here is going to go to where investment is attractive. Now, I don't think it's shocking, because this is civil servants' money. And the obligation of the people who run it is to maximize the value of their savings. Now, if they say, and they may be right or wrong, the only honest thing they can do, the way they can fulfill their fiduciary duty to public servants, is to invest abroad, that tells you we have bad policies and foreign countries have good policies.
Well, so much to discuss still, but unfortunately that's all the time we have this evening. Thank you so much for watching The Full View, and thanks to our guests this evening on the record, Duma Gqubule and also Leon Louw. And from me, it's good night. Take care.